Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone here who's joined us today. Welcome back to Reimagined with Robin. Really appreciate you tuning in and making us a part of your day. So as you know, Reimagined with Robin is a 15-minute live conversation with a leader who is working to reinvent how we interact with the world that we live in, whether it's renting physical spaces to running cafes, and even just reimagining leadership itself. Turning into our audience today, let us know, do you work in teams every day? If you do, tag your best teammate here and give him a shout out for us. I'm gonna tag Marcello on our team right after this. So this month's guest speaker is Raphael Ouzan, who is the CEO and founder of A.Team. And I've gotten to know Raphael over the past year and have witnessed the work that he and his company has done, both for our own portfolio at GGV and also for many other leading companies behind the scenes. This may sound a little bit secretive, and it was for a while, but Raphael, thank you so much for joining us as our guest today.
So glad to be here. Always fun to have conversation with you.
Thank you. So maybe let's get started by just giving the audience a brief background about who you are and how you decided to get to A.Team, and we'll then talk about what it is that you are reimagining there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got into a realization very early on and kind of just lucked out into it. I was growing up in the Champagne region in France, very much not a tech hub, as you could imagine, but realized that there were books that you could get and you could learn programming. And it was at a time where internet was becoming this kind of big thing, and everybody wanted like a website and software and things like that. So I could be kind of like the computer kid around, essentially freelancing in my teenage years, building this type of software. And then came the realization that, unfortunately, at the time at least, and where I was, no one really cared about it. And the problem with that is that you can't really do much on your own. You need people around you. And then I had those similar experiences when I decided to move away from France. I moved to Israel. I was there for a while. Then I was in the military there. And again, I was surrounded by people, or at least for the first time, really, I was surrounded by people that could team up and take a really big mission and accomplish something that would otherwise be deemed impossible. And then I started a bunch of companies, up to the point where I realized that the most meaningful thing for me, and I think for many people, is actually something very fundamental, and that's to be able to work on problems that you find fulfilling, that matter to you, with people you want to work with, and to have the autonomy to make this type of decisions. And that prompted the question that was the founding impetus of A.Team for all of us, which is, could we enable builders, people who like to build things, to team up with one another to work on problems that matter to them while having full autonomy over the decisions that shape their lives and their career, and earning well doing so? So that's kind of the short story to the journey that brought us to build A.Team.
And so you were a multi-time founder. How did you decide that this is, you want to reimagine something completely, and do you actually do that internally to your own team? So maybe just talk through what it is that you're reimagining with A.Team first.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like the journey to actually make the decision of going for it was obviously not a straight line. It was trying and kind of planning it in different ways. I had a full crypto version for A.Team before actually starting A.Team the way we did it, but it felt right from the sense that we're builders. We're basically assembling ourselves as builders, empowering other builders. It feels in complete alignment with something that we felt we're meant to be doing. And that's today perhaps the most strong factor that brings us together as a build team that is building A.Team. And it's quite meta because, and I'll give a couple of sentences on A.Team and then answer how A.Teams are actually building A.Team.
Yeah.
A.Team enables the formation of highly skilled, high-performing, highly motivated teams that of product builders that are at the top of their game. So we have this network, this highly curated network, today assembling 5,200 of the most highly skilled product managers, designers, engineers, data scientists, growth marketers that are increasingly escaping rigid structures to be able to team up with their favorite people to work on problems of their choosing with companies from early stage startups all the way to Fortune 500, including a lot of the fast growing tech unicorns, a lot of them in the GGV portfolio, and others, to even legacy companies that have A-teams at the helm that are transforming the way they build, enabling their advantage in terms of brand distribution, domain expertise, and empowering the more strategic initiatives with very high-performing teams that are built through this, what I believe to be the first team formation platform. And this whole thing works with, when we talk about reimagining teams is like such a basic concept, right? It's the core unit of work of the knowledge economy, essentially. We all part of teams. In many ways, we experience our teams more than we experience the companies that we're a part of. But then how do you form high-performing teams, right? Was a big question. We know there's a bunch of books and movies. We all know about Moneyball and others for sports. But for some reason, there wasn't much in terms of tech. And what connects this whole network was our answer to that, which is a team graph that captures essentially who works well with whom on what. You can think of it as like a skill graph meets an experience graph meets a social graph together. And that's what basically at the heart of the team formation, monitoring and scaling capabilities of A.Team. We have today working with over 270 companies across basically every industry, with A.Teams empowering many departments across the company to help supercharge the ability to build better, faster. So of course, the way we build A.Team is using A.Team. In fact, the first roadmap read, build enough of A.Teams so that A.Teams can build A.Team. And today, that's why we've been able to grow very fast. So we were, as you pointed out, in stealth for a long time, like up until last month, really. And we've been growing exponentially, basically doubling every quarter ever since we went to market in secret. And still today, we're invite only, and it requires approval to get in, both as an A-team or as a company. But we basically have those missions that we define within the organization of outcomes that we want to drive towards. And we bring A-team in hybrid team formats. We have full-time employees, you have A-teamers that are working alongside each other behind the same to drive a mission. So much so that I think, we had this summit in Portugal a few weeks ago where we all got together, and people didn't really know who's an A-teamer and who's full-time, because it doesn't really matter. What matters is, do you have the right team to drive the outcome you're trying to drive? And that's what enabled us to grow to more than triple the size of the team since the beginning of the year to now 85, 90 people across some, perhaps around 50% full-time, 50% A-teamers.
Oh, wow.
So that's how we build. Yeah.
I guess like a lot of people might misunderstand this as, even when we first met, like, how's this different from outsourcing your product or something that you want to build that like for the team, right? And so like there's like the Fivers of the world, or like you can go to 99 Design to get your design. So like, what is the disruption here specifically on the team front with A-teams? Like, is it that they're working simultaneously with you on the project, but like I feel like there's something fundamentally very different.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we have a lot of respect for the kind of previous generation of online work, so-called gig economy. In fact, when we did our seed early 2020, right before the pandemic hit and kind of made everything we thought would happen way faster than we originally intended, we brought the former CEO of Upwork as investor and advisor, and the founder of Fiverr, and consulted the people that have built that previous generation. And when you look at online work, it's really interesting what happened over the past 10, 15 years, where more and more people could earn an extra income on the side, or make money online, essentially. But somewhat, if you look at this whole category from Uber, DoorDash, all the way to Upwork and Fiverr, is somewhat capped at simple tasks. It's somewhat of a commoditizing experience. And there recently was this HBO article about how gig economy is quite dehumanizing, to the point that, if you get into an Uber, do you really care if it's a human being or an AI? Like, not really.
Oh, wow.
Right? But then the value actually is in the higher order challenges, is in solving really complex problems like building new products, building great consumer experience, building a new revenue stream, solving a data science problem, cybersecurity issue, fintech, crypto, like all these things where fundamentally, you know exactly what you need to solve that. You need the most highly skilled professionals that can work together effectively with complementary skill set that opt in to work on this. So basically, I think the transformation that we're seeing now is the introduction of what we call the builder economy, where the people who can build things really are the people who matter. And what we're enabling is for people at the top of the game that want to pursue that craft with autonomy to be able to escape rigid structures, to be able to do the work that they find most fulfilling. It's not about a side income. Like we're seeing hundreds of people that are choosing to leave the kind of velvet prison sometimes of working on things that actually they're not that interesting for them. And especially throughout COVID, when the Great Reconsideration happened, the Great Resignation, people saw around them that, look, things can get really bad and life can be actually short. You know, what am I doing in my life? I have this like top skill. There's probably really good things I could be doing, or at least enjoy this better, or have the freedom to work the way I'd like to work. And that is enabling that the highly skilled professionals to work in ways that were previously basically not practical, and to be able to work with companies from you know, startups and dozens of them, hundreds of them even, to companies like Lyft and Pepsi and many others, to choose the problems that they can uniquely solve well and that they care about solving. So that builder economy is the big transformation that we're seeing. And especially as we see the employer-employee relationship being disrupted so much over the past few years, I think we're seeing that as being an incredible shift in the world of work.
Yeah. And I think there's also, like you said, not just the shift of the world of work, but also shift in the mindset and even how like companies approach launching products or initiatives. So like, you know, a lot of times when I think of like, oh, can't this company just launch this feature, right? But like even launching a feature, it's not like, oh, just hire 3 more engineers and there it is, right? Like there's so much more that's involved. There's like the speccing of it, there's the design element of, there's the user testing, there's the engineering, there's all these people that have to come together to make it work. And one of the things that really stood out to me when we had a conversation before was like, you talked about Google and some of the biggest tech firms are able to like build these teams up, launch that product. If it doesn't work, disband and redo it somewhere else, right? And so I feel like this is a lot of why is this happening now? And that discussion around like, why is it happening now to other companies? And because you're actually able to enable these companies to think differently and put together teams differently.
That's absolutely right. And in fact, it's becoming more and more critical as things get kind of roughed up and disrupted even further and faster, where you see that shift in thinking from thinking in terms of headcount and departments, which, let's face it, like you're an engineer looking for a job, like do you really want to be like engineer 135? I'm like, no, like that doesn't make sense. But if we start thinking in terms of initiative and outcomes, that's much less commoditizing. And that's a really good way, whether you're using A.Team or not, to attract and retain the right talent that actually opts in to work on this particular challenge. So we start seeing more and more of the companies that are asking themselves, how do we build the company of the future? We know that the older model are broken, or they're breaking literally in our hands. And we find that what they're doing is something that we call mission-based work, which is identifying the outcomes that you want to drive and creating this team charter. So like, okay, this is what we want to drive, this is the vision. And exactly like you said, at first it may be not very clear, not very prescriptive, because the exploration phase is perhaps the most important. And then you ask yourself then, therefore, the question, do I have the right team to drive that outcome? If the answer is no, there's a problem. If the answer is yes, good. Now, when you start thinking that way, does it really matter if you're a full-time employee or part-time employee? Not really. What truly matters is having the right team for the job, and you will start. And the team is not a construct is useful because it's an evolving organism. So you may start. We actually encourage people to start with the smallest team possible. Small team, big mission is a good way to reduce the overhead of coordination and be more nimble and agile. So you may start an exploration with a product manager, a designer, an engineer to prototype things. And then you see, oh, this thing has legs and could be interesting. Now you have better product plans. that we can work on a larger team spec with more engineering, more execution capability, operation, and so forth. You can expand that team either with full-time employees or A-teamers, and you can kind of repeat that across the organization to then have this kind of hybrid ability with superpowers to move at a speed that was unattainable before, with low overhead and high flexibility. And this is the way to attract the type of top kind of the 10x type of talent that opts in for a particular problem because they truly care about it and they want to work with the people that are there to solve it.
So given that, you know, the economy right now is going through a likely going to go into full recession soon, and companies are facing or grappling with the challenges of like, where do I hone in my OpEx? How do I spend? What do I do with my headcount? How do you envision A.Team to be a part of this conversation? And then how do you think our world will be different in like 5 to 10 years?
Yes, you know, it's interesting to look back at the past 2 years, and it felt every time there was something new happening that, oh my God, like really, do we have another crisis? Like the last one was like 2 months ago, and they keep on happening. It seems like faster and faster. We actually see from our vantage point that the greatest disruption is actually still ahead, because we've never had so many tidal waves coming and crashing at the same time. When you think about the core relationship with work that we had, you know, it was pretty simple. We have this social contract where we say, you as employer, I'm going to give you the ability to tell me where to go, what to do, where to be, and you're going to give me stability, right? But then what happened in February, March, April 2020, we thought the world was ending, so a bunch of people got laid off. Now it's happening again. So that illusion of stability is breaking. Then you have the Great Resignation, the Great Consideration. You have remote, you have people moving out of cities. And then you have this downturn, which pushes companies to then think about profitability, business efficiency, and yet have to create the ability to move faster, because a downturn doesn't mean slow down. In fact, quite the opposite. You have to do more with less. And we find that we're having this conversation, and we've been having them with companies that have the foresight to start thinking about this early on, and some that we're discussing live now, which is, okay, how do you move fixed costs to variable costs? How do I make it so that I don't have as much overhead, but I can move really fast and build the things that will create new revenue streams, or that will increase margin, or that will get me to have better acquisition costs because I get closer to my users or my customers. And the way we do it is simple. We have this, so we talk about mission-based work, which is what are the outcomes that have to happen? And when there's a downturn, it kind of helps people to kind of sharpen their tools and be like, this is what we need, and we must get that. And then you ask the question of what is the minimum viable team to make that happen? So you have a few people on the team, you have probably needs and gaps. Let's fill that in the smallest possible form, and then expand only on as a needed basis, while increasing your overall flexibility from a budget standpoint and from a financial standpoint, where you can move on a dime as you learn more information and you realize what works and what doesn't. And the ability to move faster and actually accelerate in a downturn is really important. And when you think about, you know, a lot of companies are hiring freezes or even layoffs, there's many challenges around that. But the biggest problem is the loss of momentum. Momentum is this currency that drives everything forward. So we really want to accelerate in the strike zone that you identify as being your core focus or areas of focus, and build faster, iterate faster, learn faster with your customers to be able to actually use this time to go much further than you would have otherwise, without increasing risk and overhead, and actually maximizing flexibility. So that's the conversation that we're seeing. That's the work that we're doing. And in a way, that's what gives us confidence with our own company that we can manage cash flow really, really well, because we have 50% of our workforce being through A.Team, which is, you know, very well managed and can grow very easily as needed.
Yeah, this will like really set the stage to what's to come in the future, right? Because people are now exploring with that model, and they're like facing it up front with, like you said, all the tidal waves of changes happening. It really catalysts for, you know, for like impetus for that change. So
yeah. And I think if I can add one more thing, I think that in the highly skilled quadrant, like the people that are kind of like the 10x type of people that can team up with others and really make a difference, that also provides an edge that is absolutely critical. because you need to do more with less. And we find that that will be such a core component to make sure that the core initiatives that you have the kind of 10x type of people, the true A players that can move things along really fast, make fewer mistakes, and build better, because we just have less margin for error in an economy that is worsening, it seems, by the day.
Yeah. Well, I want to end on a more positive note.
Yes, please.
And last question, because I know we're at time. Like, how are you as a CEO reimagining yourself this year?
I find that we're just doing H2 planning with the team. And I find that, we get caught up sometimes in companies to think in terms of tasks and projects. And that's very limiting. It's almost like a jail of our own making, where what I find myself kind of graduating to as a leader, or attempting to, is to actually help people in teams to think in terms of their mission, vision, the outcomes they want to drive, and trusting them to figure out how to get there. And that will also change as we learn. And I find that sometimes even the smartest people have a hard time going to that higher order of thinking, but it's so freeing when they do, because then the teams create their own compass for progress that enables them to make better and better decisions over time. So as leadership, I think across companies, the more we can figure out the missions within the overall mission, think in terms of clearly defining and being tangible in a vision of, okay, in 6 months, what does winning look like? What do we want to see in very practical terms? And how are we going to measure it? What that will actually do for the company, the business, or users or customers is really meaningful, because it is freeing people to be able to work on things that they understand matter to them, that they opt into willingly and with eyes fully open, and build their ability to make the best decisions to get to that point as quickly as possible. And I find that to be quite exciting, in fact, because as things get tight, that's also an experience where we can team up better, focus better on the impact that we can bring about, and really build the type of iconic companies and organizations that would have never happened otherwise, would have taken so many years. So these are challenging times, but also very exciting and really powerful, because building has never been so important.
Wow, that's really good advice. I think, like, especially in a time like this, it's all about reflecting and like figuring out people, and it's not just about like executing on a task, but really finding out like who your core mission is as a company, and like how to drive everybody to that. And it seems like that's also something that translates really well throughout A.Team as well. So really, thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on to our show today. Everyone, please stay tuned for future videos. Thanks, Raphael.
Thank you so much.